Hello, everybody. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to 30 minutes talking about the humanization of the transformation as part of the humans of IT in this connection zone. Hope you're having a good time. We got 30 minutes to try and look at the people typically involved in the corporate transformation. And in our case, we're obviously talking about moving to the cloud, Microsoft 365, that type of work. You'll find this is a series that I have created and been speaking about for a while. The idea that we try and evolve the organization, that we're not kind of jumping around change, a bit of change, and making it difficult for people to understand. We're kind of looking for a glide path, a nice smooth glide path for change. And let's be honest, we've all had Ignites every 6 months for the last 2 years in virtual, and there's a lot of changes coming around. And we've heard over the last few days that there's new applications and new changes. And Viva, of course, has been running at pace. Now, we're not going to talk about change and adoption necessarily, but we are going to talk around the aspects of change and adoption associated with the people involved. So the first thing I wanted to look at is to kind of just introduce a new team. This team here met less than 24 hours ago. In fact, it was 23 hours ago. I'm at the South Coast Summit in Southampton in England for the next 2 to 3 days, doing some workshops. A lot of time bringing the feeds in from Ignite, but a few of us bumped into each other at a table. Some of these people, we've never even met each other before, but we were here for one purpose. Interestingly enough, Microsoft have been quoting some of the statistics about people wanting to go back into the office, and 85% of people return into the workplace. And of course, we are speakers in the communities around the Microsoft products, so it was good that we were able to come back. There's some interesting facts about this picture that I wanted to kind of bring out. There are humans in this picture. There are people. That's what we're talking about. There are humans in this picture who describe themselves as non-binary. There are some fairly strange people. There are humans in this people from Finland and from Belgium and from the UK, and that's only where they traveled from. There are humans in this picture who have met every 2 weeks, over 100 times in the last 4 years, to create the Office 365 Distilled podcast. And today we actually recorded our 100th episode live. But these humans in here are dead smart. There's people that know unified communications, Microsoft 365. There are some humans that are over 60. I don't know whether you can work out who they are. And there are some users, some humans in here who drink cider, whiskey, water, beer. We had burgers and fish and I'm trying to get to the point here that this team of people are here for one purpose, but they're different. They're coming from different locations. They have different ways of thinking and different ways of living their lives. And that's completely irrelevant to the point that we just simply respected the fact that we turned up here to do a great job, to work together. And as you can see, we're having some fun as we sent a bit of a selfie off to the organizers to say, hey, we're here kind of thing, and where are you? Keep that in mind as we start to look at the other kind of humans that are involved in these kinds of projects and where we go. And so you might recognize a few faces, and I did check that they didn't mind this picture being on here, so I have all of that covered. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the groups of people that get involved around introducing Microsoft 365 specifically, because that's kind of what I do. And kind of put some energy into, and they put energy into you as well, as we go from kind of non-cloud working to cloud working. Now, every one of these groups of people brings something to the table, but of course, they're also very busy people. They're also people that have a normal job to do because they may or may not be part of your team. So we only have 30 minutes. So we're just going to go through, pick some aspects of these people, the techniques I've used in the past to try and bring them on board. And of course, as you look at these groups, some of them are going to require more effort from the project team than others. But of course, the key requirement, just like that team of people around that table, is about respecting them for the people that they are, but more importantly, for the job that they do. so that there's a win-win situation and the value from both sides of the equation fits into play. Now, the first, the executives, you guys have been, they were the people that was coming up at the beginning of this communication while we were building our numbers up. But we also need to think about these people. Who are they? Well, I've kind of labeled them. They're all C-level kinds of people. And the problem with C-level kinds of people is that what matters to them is numbers. The kind of thing they might say is, hey, we would like to have 200 people on Microsoft 365 every month for the next 10 months, or something of that kind. Everything is done by numbers because their job, of course, is to get a return of investment on the time and effort that people are putting into play. And part of my job is to say to these people, guys, there are human beings in here that matter. So there are people that are going to be forced to change, etc., etc. And I remind them that they said, we are going to go to Microsoft 365 and move to the cloud because there's lots of good business reasons for doing it, without actually asking the workforce, do you want to go? Now, there's good reasons for it. I do understand. But there's a balance around this organization. Instantly, people are hearing this news without understanding the value. And so maybe there's some of those skills that these people used to get to these senior positions that would help them be accepted more within the organization. And they need to think about values driven by leaders that is trusted by humans. So when the CIO or the HR director sits there and starts talking about the forthcoming change for these kinds of projects, there's a list there of some values that and some traits that maybe will help build some trust. So some transparency around, yes, it might not be as easy as we think, guys, but we'll give you as much help as we possibly can. And then, of course, they need to commit to delivering that. And they also need to get a bit street smart, maybe go down and or provide you with some support and be available whenever they're needed. And part of my job, if I, as a change manager, as a project manager, is to make sure that Microsoft 365 is not a secret and that the board say that they're behind it. And remember, this is probably 4 to 6 months ahead of anything that you're going to roll out or any applications that they're going to see. So the board, the executives, they have quite a big role in terms of making sure that people are comfortable with what they're needing to do. Of course, this session is normally longer than 30 minutes, and we can dig down into some of the things that they can do. But in this case, just a case of identifying them for you so that you can sort of consider them if you're in a position where you're trying to communicate a Microsoft 365 project. The one that you're probably more used to than anything else is your personas. Your personas are key to your project because the 2 or 3 people within the project change team really need to understand within the organization the kinds of people, the kinds of roles, the kinds of responsibilities that are in place that needs to be supported by all of the aspects that Microsoft 365 delivers. Because let's be honest, it's going to deal with everybody, especially if you've not done anything within that space yet. You haven't changed any email over, or you haven't moved any content, you haven't added any of the new applications, or you're still running some of the old sort of meeting software. And you need to think about making sure that you get as much spread across the organization as possible. And then I very quickly want to mention the word team again, because this is going to be a team. It's going to be a brand new team, and they're going to have not worked with each other before, or very rarely. And if it's a large organization, of course, they probably don't even know who each of these are. But there's certain things that we need to think about. So, for example, what role they have within the organization, but also what country they come from. If you're an international organization, people in different countries will expect to be treated in different ways. They will expect different kinds of messages. They will respond differently. And if we're going to plan, if we're going to keep the project moving forward, then we need to understand that, hey, I might need a salesperson, or it's my persona, but maybe I need a salesperson from this country and a salesperson from that continent, just to make sure that I'm going to get the right kind of information that I need. The persona's role is very much to tell you how and what benefit and what value they're going to be able to get from the changes that you're going to implement across the organization. Something else to consider when you start to identify the personas is how they're around. There's value in somebody that's only started 2 months ago, as well as there's value in somebody that's been in the organization for 15 years. You will get a different story. You'll get a story from somebody that's only been here for 2 months that says, when in my last company, this was the difference. And that's going to give you as much value as somebody in 15 years that said, yeah, well, I've been here, I know everybody. This is how we do projects, and IT are never trusted to deliver on time. The history, which is sometimes good and of course sometimes bad. The other thing to consider with your personas, with your teams, is this here. Of course, you may or may not know this, but these are the sort of personality process, the Myers-Briggs. If you're going to try and get a picture of how the organization is prepared, then you need to understand some of the personality traits of the people that you're talking to. So some people focused people will have a different story about those that make a joke of most things, or talk about the people that they're working with, or basically, you know, want to sort of tell you that, hey, I've seen all these changes before, etc., etc. So it's worth understanding those people. Now, personas, of course, are like your pre-sales. So if I'm buying a new car, it's the personas that will give you an opinion on what kind of car you need. It's your family and your wife and the kids, and, you know, saying, hey, we want a car that can do this and a car that can do that. These people are saying, hey, yes, no, in my organization, I spend a lot of time dealing with emails, and I need to be able to automate blah, blah, blah. Or, yes, I have meetings with these companies all the time, and it would be good if we can treat them as an internal employee, etc., etc. So these people are your pre-sales. They're going to tell you the kinds of things that your project needs to do. You get user stories from these. In a normal project world, you'll get requirements. And of course, those requirements are going to drive some of the key messages and the communications that you need to put in place. One of the key messages here is, do not underestimate how much time it will take to question these people, to talk to these people, to actually get the information you need. And it'll take 2 or 3 iterations of time, and re-emphasizing some of the points they made, and questioning and digging down deep. But your personas are a key attribute. If anybody does listen to my podcast, then you'll know that I've not always been convinced about personas, but recently I've been able to get a lot of value out of them, and for it done a better project as well. So personas. The next group of people that I want to talk about are your ambassadors. They're not a steer code. The personas are not really going to direct your project. At the end of the day, you always have to have an idea of the scope and what you're actually going to deliver within the project. But the ambassadors are very, very good at being able to tell you how to evolve their organization, the things that will add instant value and the things that will cause a problem. So it has a key role deciding on what you actually need to say and how things will be delivered. It is bigger as well than the ambassadors. They do have a golden key to the management teams and to the heads of department, and they very much can get you into management meetings and monthly meetings and improve your communications to the sort of people that manage the organization. But ambassadors are kind of, yeah, of people. Okay, they need to have the inquiring mind. You're not looking for somebody that only responds to you if you ask a question. From an ambassador's perspective, it's kind of real time, close to rolling out, close to making a change and supporting that change. I'm never relaxed when I'm working with ambassadors, or if I'm setting a team, and they never fail to surprise me about how much they understand about the business. So I'm talking here about inquiring minds, like being motivated to respond, to react when something bad happens, to think about some of the directions that you're moving in, and to sort of connect the dots and tell you about the implications. When I run an ambassador team, I tend to run every quarter face-to-face in today's world, and everybody's busy. A lot of virtual meetings for 2 months out of 3. But in the face-to-face, I never get surprised. And just recently, one of the organizations that I was working with is a railway transportation company. They started to talk about culture, which is very unusual for ambassadors. They tend to focus around where they're at. But they identified that as an organization, they did not have very good email culture or meeting culture, and people turned up late and those kinds of things. So what the ambassadors were able to do was to drive a set of culture pillars within the organization. On a project, and especially a change project, is very important, because it actually helps change behaviors very much because of being told the way they need to behave around certain topics like meetings. And so the ambassadors were able to bring into play some things that I would not necessarily have thought about doing. And the really cool thing is that they get a feeling of owning this. So the more you can get out of your ambassadors, the more things you can bring into your change. If they own it, they will support it and even run it. Often they get themselves together as a team, and then of course move on and make the change within their departments. Talking about teams is interesting because we obviously have Insights, and Viva Insights is something that you're actually going to install, and we know that obviously it's one of those things that can cause questions when you're getting those great emails that say, hey, have you explained to Tracy that you're going to be late for the meeting tomorrow, because you get those insights. But if you go for an upgraded version of it, the premium versions of Insights, then you get the ability to create teams, and as a manager or owner of that team, you get to get a lot of feedback and understand who they're talking to and where they're at. So any of these teams, I guess you don't want to create the executives and spy on who they're talking to, but being transparent and open and saying, hey guys, we're going to create this team and we're going to review on a monthly basis you're talking to, so I can understand, you know, where those communications are going. So Viva can have, as a very practical hands-on, can have a lot of input into this. So ambassadors, again, never to be underestimated. And again, you need to find the right number to support your organization. If you have 75 divisions around the world, then you can't support, you know, maybe potentially 150 different ambassadors, and you may need to break them down into smaller groups, but then bring them together every half a year or something. But ambassadors, a key part of the transformation process. And of course, these people are willing, so they're happy to be involved in the project. Not everybody is so happy. Another aspect then, these groups are champions, which sometimes champions and ambassadors are treated as the same people. And you may not have enough people in your organization to have groups of people doing things. And bear in mind that every group that you're organizing, every team that you're trying to get to assist you to make this change, you have to manage. You have to set up meetings and support them in their role. They're doing it for free, and they have other jobs to do to sort of keep them busy. But champions are interesting in that they tend to be a step above your ambassadors. Ambassadors are very, I always think of them at business level, working with the people and the individuals, whereas champions to me are all those people that already help people fix their printers, and they work with the help desk if there's a problem locally that they need. Maybe the guy that presses the reset button in a box in a kind of remote office. A champion is the person that people go to in a department because they know that John is actually quite smart at being able to work out why something won't print. Finding these people and their capabilities is really, really important, because they do bring things to the table. So they're willing to work and they're willing to learn in IT, and actually they often enjoy any additional training that you may or may not put into them. And they're also willing to phone you up and say, hey, you know, since you've put X and Y on the network, or since you've updated this area, then we find now that we can't update our form, or we are able to sort of get these emails coming in that we used to have before. So they will start to give you direction. So it's very important as you set your champions up that you arrange with the service desk or whoever your support organization is to be able to take priority calls from champions to answer their questions and be prepared to help them and give advice as and when they need it, and sort of treat them slightly with a bit more respect than your ambassadors or the normal person phoning a help desk. You're looking for a team of people here in these champions who you can tell that the project is not doing so well. These people are not going to report back. But by being transparent about any delays in the project or any security issues that's causing things not to go as well as you wanted, or upgrades, or the kinds of things in these kinds of projects that DNS perhaps wasn't set up the way it was supposed to be set up, etc. These people you can talk to at that level. You can't obviously throw high technical problems at them, but you can help them understand, and naturally they then explain it back to their organizations when somebody asks them a question as to why X is not working the way it used to do. So they will have that information. And the other thing about champions, they're very much up for a challenge. They love the challenges of learning these new things. And sometimes, very often, in fact, you can't motivate them enough because they want things quicker. One of the usual arguments that I end up with from champions is that you roll out something like Outlook or MS Teams, and they're already looking up applications and add-ons and apps and things that their team needs within the Outlook or MS Teams apps that you probably haven't got the governance in place yet to support, or the user to support. So you need to make sure you've got those processes sorted out, or you've explained it beforehand, and you sort of sit there and say, look, this is what we're doing for the next 4 or 5 months, get everybody used to it, and then we'll start to bolt on new kinds of applications or new processes. And finally, in the champions, then you should look at Microsoft's adoption.microsoft.com site and look at the champions app that you can put onto SharePoint and Teams, where they gain badges and they can go and help you identify things and do certain tasks. And on the latest version, you can actually set the tasks that suit your organization. Because, as I said before, they like a challenge. They're also willing to learn. And very much with the ambassadors dealing from a business perspective and dealing with managers and getting you involved in the relevant people there, and the champions dealing with the coalface kind of solutions, not being able to not being able to work on this aspect of their work or their process, then you get quite a lot covered. So it is quite important. So we've talked so far about the executives, of course, which are going to be involved mainly around communications and awareness. And we've talked about the personas that are going to basically help you define the services that you're going to deliver. And we've talked about the ambassadors that are representing the business, of course, the champions, and the fact that they're going to help you be able to support and hopefully start an organic growth of technology. So that leaves us with one more group, our end users. Now, the thing about end users is they can make you look like a rock star if you can get everything else in place and rock and roll, or of course, they may not. It's very difficult sometimes to work out where you're at. This is where pilots come in, of course, where you can sort of run pilot exercises with end users that are not champions or not ambassadors, and sort of work out whether they have enough knowledge of the project or not. And the thing about end users is they're the people that are on the receiving end of a lot of your awareness and desire and change things. And there's a few ideas that I'd like to share that have been successful for me. So this video is an awareness video. It's basically telling people, hey, these are some of the basic functionalities of Microsoft 365, of working in Office. And we've basically looked at the pillars we need to put this. But what you will see is a lot of cartoons. And the advantage of using cartoons or drawings is you're actually able to represent the users within the organization. And so by thinking about trying to sort of pick out individuals in the organization that are well known and use them within your collateral, whether they're videos, whether they're instruction sheets, whether they're just on the web pages from your sort of digital way of working site, whether they're part of your communications. There's a familiarity. No, the video doesn't have sound, Artura, so that's fine. There's a familiarity with the fact that that person is doing my job. So that's good. So the video was actually built in this particular case to go on screens on the walls around the organization. So there was no sound with it. It was just to sit there playing in the back. Apologies if I should have cleared that one up first to stop all of your questions. But the idea, it was written and created so that you could sit and watch it for 2 or 3 minutes, see some of the new features, some of the new functionalities. So when it comes to dealing with users and dealing with training courses, very often, because of that familiarity, then that can increase your take-up and those kinds of things. So we've looked at those 4 or 5 groups. Let's just spend 2 minutes bringing them together, and then if there are any questions, them. So evolve is where we want to try and go here. We're not talking about trying to jar people. We're talking about a word that invokes gentleness, a gentle ride moving forward. But at the end of the day, we still have to change. So it needs to be consistent around that evolution. And of course, there are certain keywords we can add to that. And we've talked about creating those teams. But when you're trying to move something that's slow and steady, it needs to be continual. It needs to be something that is constantly delivering the messages, constantly setting the desire, constantly advising them that this is how they can get their knowledge and their training. You want to make sure the messages are accepted, and that's where a lot of your personas can come in the early days, but your ambassadors and champions, that you can use the corporate terms and descriptions of things that they want to be able to do and put it they understand. And it's important to measure this, of course. We need to know that we are changing people from one side to the other, but those measurements are really so we can feed back and help and decide, you know, we moved too early into knowledge and throwing training at them without really giving them the desire, and so we can take a step back or two. And choices are important so that you can adjust your messages, adjust your processes, adjust your plan, and make sure that there's some variables in there that will give people more or less time moving forward. So we're talking about evolving the plan for our users, and just a sort of bit of a reminder, 60% of your success criteria is based upon that humanization. Okay, and that's kind of a little underwhelmed a little bit in some respects, because yeah, the technology needs to be configured, the governance needs to be done, but even that involves the kind of humanization part of your transformation. But you know this, I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know, I'm fairly certain. But a couple of things that I find and I think about as a basis: evolution is driven by continual improvement. So you need to be able to have everything in place so that you can move forward. And remember, your personas may run at different speeds. So personas that are more at the hands-on level of the business, they will not pick things up as quickly as people that are continually running with or financial systems. And so you need to plan the training and the messages accordingly to work through that. Continual improvement, of course, is driven by culture, not just a culture for change, but a culture to move on and basically change the way that they approach something, and also the way that they use something. And of course, you need to create that culture, and the only way you can create that culture is actually by identifying the humans that have some direct questions in there. So that's the end of a very quick half-an-hour run through to give you some idea of how I perceive the different humanizations within the organization. I'm going to just check the questions. I don't know whether there will be any, but I'm well aware that we're at the end of the time. And I hope it was useful to you. Yeah, I think most of it was about the video, which didn't have any sound, so that's cool. So Steve Dalby to the South Coast Summit here in Southampton in the UK, and I think it's about dinner time here, wherever you are. I hope you're having fun, and I know you've had a good Ignite. Bye.